The point of this is to provide the best facts-driven show that we possibly can.
Ideally, you have a glue guy who is good.
Hashtag glue guy, hashtag locker room guy. You can't go sign Bobby Holik to $1 trillion. You can't do these things.
Very satisfying.
The absolute best NYR show in town.
This is the Liberty Blue Rangers Podcast. With Andrew Chelney and Nick Zararis.
Rangers fans, welcome to the best Rangers podcast in town. I am Andrew Chelney alongside Nick Zararis, and we are Liberty Blue. We scream about the Rangers so that you can save your voice. That's how deeply we care about you, and we appreciate that you've joined us for the ride. This is episode 16, pre-recorded once again, because Nick is unavailable at our normal Monday time, but we wanted to have something ready for you at that slot regardless. We'll put the full video up on our YouTube, Liberty Blue Podcast, and we'll have the audio version up on Apple, Spotify, and everywhere else you get your podcasts. And if you use a platform that we are not on, do let us know. We will put the podcast up there as well. At Liberty Blue Pod on Twitter and Instagram, I'm at Chelney Andrew, Chelney Andrew, and that is at Nick Zararis, Nick Zararis. These are our Twitter handles. So, Nick, we have tackled every division except for one, which would remind me which the last division is. Which one is it?
It's funny you say this because we were both at the Rangers preseason game Thursday night, and they asked the question during one of the stoppages, what division do the Rangers and Devils play in? And the one guy said the Eastern Division,
right,
and looked very confused at the question, like he had never heard of the Metropolitan Division before. But we are tackling the Metro today. This is probably, I would say, 1 through 8, the best division in the NHL. It's not the most talented. It's not the most top heavy. I would say the Central, which we tackled last week, is probably the most competitive. But top to bottom, 1 through 8, these are pretty solid teams. Like, I know we like to make fun of the Devils. The Devils could be a decent team. The Blue Jackets could be a little bit closer to being a good team. The Islanders could be a good team where they could be in the Connor Bedard sweepstakes. No one really knows. And then there are the 4 teams that made the playoffs last year in the Rangers, Capitals, Penguins, and Hurricanes. So there's a lot to tackle here. We know this division very well. I really was just rattling my brain thinking about if anything really important happened. And the biggest move in this division, I mean, Trocheck maybe, the Penguins keeping the band together. There's not really one move you could say was the most impactful in a way. I mean, Gaudreau is in the division now. That game isn't as easy, but this should be interesting. And this is something you asked me before what Josh and I had talked about at the game last night. We were talking about it. We don't feel like the division is all that different from last year. That if anything, Carolina might be a little bit worse, which gives the Rangers a real opportunity here to have a good regular season as opposed to everybody looking at each other and being like, are the Rangers good? No, I think we can all agree the Rangers should be good. And if they are not good in this division, that's a problem.
This might be, if not the best, and one of the best divisions in the sport, only because there's only one team that's a complete dumpster fire, and that is the Philadelphia Flyers, who we'll touch upon later. Everybody else at least has a decent chance of making the playoffs. Even I think the Devils have very much improved their roster since last year. I think the Islanders are on paper bad year after year, and yet somehow are always either in the playoffs or near the playoffs or one of those two, or we'll touch upon them in a minute here. But like, again, the Flyers are really the only team that I have zero faith in. Like, you can at least make an argument that every other team in this division has a solid chance of making the playoffs. Maybe even the Blue Jackets, if Jonas Korpisalo shows up day one and puts up a .930 save percentage, then maybe the Blue Jackets get there. Like, there's an avenue for most of these teams to get to the playoffs. The Philadelphia Flyers, though, they don't have one. Sorry.
No, I mean, we can start with, I mean, they're screwed by their own doing. I mean, from what Chuck Fletcher said, and we're jumping ahead here, but just the incompetence that the Flyers put on this summer is one of the worst off seasons I can recall. I mean, we're going to tackle them later, but just mind-numbingly stupid decisions on a lot of different levels. All right, so We're going to transition here. We're going to pull up this, and we're going to go over here. And there we go. Okay, so Carolina, first in the division last year. They have the highest over-under total for this upcoming season, 103.5. The Rangers are not second, which we're going to talk about in terms of over-unders for point totals, but Carolina tried to improve their roster. They're kind of a case where they made the playoffs a couple years in a row now, and they've run into teams that are just better than them. And their approach to remedying that was, okay, we need more high-end talent. Brent Burns, still pretty good offensive play driver, doesn't give you any defense. Max Pacioretty, when he's been healthy the last couple of years, has been great, but he's not coming back till February, March, the earliest, off of an Achilles. Stottsny to fill in down the middle. They're going to have, we talked about this a couple of weeks ago, where they have Kotkaniemi, they have Stottsny, they have Aho, they have Jared Stahl. They're going to configure those four in some order for a 1 through 4. They bring in Dylan Coughlin. They lose Tony DeAngelo. They lose Vinny Trocheck. They use Nito Niederreiter, who somebody I think we're going to lose. Somebody a little bit underrated, but somebody who's an important player for them. I think he had 18, 19 goals last year, and that's real offense. Those types of guys are valuable, and to lose them, and then they lost 2 depth defensemen in Ian Cole and Brendan Smith. This Carolina team has been the internet darling for years now. Everybody keeps waiting for them to kind of break through in the playoffs because the regular season results have been there since Brindamore's been the head coach.
You take a look at everything that they've done over the course of this past offseason, and besides the Pacioretty deal, which essentially they got Pacioretty for free because Vegas doesn't know how to add things, they got either the same or worse in a lot of their kind of movements. You can argue Tony DeAngelo's like off ice things are just staying on like on ice production for just a second here. Like, is 37-year-old Brent Burns at this stage of his career? Does he provide more value than Tony DeAngelo on the ice?
I wouldn't think so.
I mean, he can't move as fast. That's for sure. Not that Tony DeAngelo is an incredible skater or anything, but at least like he has at this point of Brent Burns' career probably a higher ceiling, at least on the power play. Maybe Brent Burns, if you just put him on the blue line and just tell him to shoot things on the power play, then he can put up points for you. But he's not going to be able to be the first guy down the ice anymore. He's not going to be the guy that he was in San Jose or even in Minnesota for that matter. Like he's not. He's just 37 years old. That's time. Time eventually gets everybody. So. Okay, so you have now an older defenseman who's going to play in your top 4. You add Ryan Dzingel and Paul Stastny, who are okay. Again, Paul Stastny is another player that was solid for his entire career, but he's old now. So you can't really slot him into the top 6 or maybe even the third line at this point. Like, he's just a much slower player than he was. So that's kind of my biggest concern with Carolina. Yeah, they're still going to be a playoff team. They still have Rob Brind'Amour as their head coach, who is incredible at doing what he does. I'd run through a wall for that man. Like he's a great general for them behind the bench. But you take a look at their departures. Vinny Trocheck, of course, went to the Rangers, and we talked about Tony DeAngelo, Nito Niederreiter, who is as you mentioned, an underrated player for them, who's now out of there. Also lose Ian Cole, Max Domi, who's a guy who is now in Chicago. And you take a look at who they brought in. Yeah, they got Brent Burns, they got Paul Stastny, Ryan Dzingel, a guy, and they kind of are either the same, maybe a little bit worse. Pacioretty does increase the amount that I like this team for sure, especially because they got him for free. But I would have liked to see a little bit more from them this past offseason. And if you hear, by the way, I live by a hospital, so there's all those sirens in the background. But I would have liked to see a little bit more out of them this offseason, and I didn't. And that kind of leaves me wanting more from them, but we'll see how they approach this season.
So this is one of the things that Josh and I talked about at the game last night was in this division, Carolina has done volume offense forever, where they throw the puck at the net as many opportunities as they can. They overwhelm you. They're going to skew heavily towards greater than 50% Corsi. And sometimes even that doesn't translate to expected goals because they're just flinging the puck from anywhere, trying to create those ugly goals, those second chance opportunities that are more dangerous, but harder to replicate over a long period of time. And eventually, I think they're going to reach that kind of breaking point where they're not going to be able to play this style if they want to go deeper into the playoffs. And we saw this against the Rangers. They were just flinging the puck at the net from every possible direction. It seemed like the Rangers didn't have the puck ever in that series. But when the Rangers did have the puck, those few opportunities they were quality scoring chances. They actually scored the goal, which has been a Carolina issue in the playoffs the last couple of years. They've had a hard time actually putting the puck in the net, even though they've possessed it a lot. And that gets into a philosophical debate of, can you still be a super competitive team that has cup aspirations looking for volume as opposed to quality? And there isn't a right answer right now. We don't have enough of a statistical track record to know if this is a viable way to construct a roster and to use a roster. But at the very least, it's something that's in my mind that maybe 2 years ago, 3 years ago, I was still kind of waiting for Carolina to get to this point. Now Carolina's got to make that next step. They are a consistent playoff team now. Now we need to see them in a conference final, a cup final, go for a cup, and because their core is getting expensive now. They've paid Aho, they've paid Svechnikov, they have to pay Slavin. The money, once you start running out of places to put money, that's when it gets difficult to stay a really good team. So we'll see what Carolina. You don't know what Freddie Anderson's going to give you. He was great last year in really long stretches for them, but goaltending is very fickle. The Hurricanes have rolled the goalie carousel a lot the last couple of years, but Carolina should be fine. I would be shocked if this wasn't a first or second place in this division.
They're gonna be a solid team, but I think we share the same concerns of, okay, and then what? Because they're gonna make the playoffs and they're gonna look dangerous, but when the moment comes, is this the right team that can do the most amount of damage in the East? And the answer is I don't know, because for like we talked about, for as much as they improve the team, they still have gaping holes that they didn't really fix, I want to say, or at least put a temporary placeholder above where the hole is. And I just don't know if that temporary placeholder can hold up for the entire season plus playoffs. That's really my biggest concern with them. And will they make the playoffs? Sure, of course they will. I would think so, barring catastrophic injuries to the entire team. Pacioretty will come. I think he's going to come back in January, if I remember correctly. He's going to come in and provide some necessary offense for this team. But ultimately, with the departures that they've had, are the additions right for the Carolina Hurricanes? And as of late September, I don't know. That's kind of the best way I could describe that. Like that, Sebastian Aho, obviously a tremendous player. You have Svechnikov is a great player. You still have a lot of good pieces on this team, but you got holes. And what are you going to do to fix them? The Hurricanes don't have any cap anymore, so you're not going to have whole lot at the deadline. So this is, unless you trade somebody out, this is your team, and I still have concerns.
I think every team has concerns, to be fair.
Sure.
But that's just counterpoint. Okay. Moving along now, we're going to talk about the Rangers here. I'm not going to go too deep in this because we want to do a full Rangers preview episode where we can get a little bit more into the nitty-gritty, but very quiet offseason for the Rangers. Their one splurge was Vinny Trocheck. Other than that, a lot of minimum guys. They splurged a little bit on backup goalie and Halak, about $500,000 more than what most people had bookmarked for the backup goalie. VZPTO, sure. Deming as the third goalie in case there's an injury, fine. Ryan Carpenter, if he's in the lineup over Ryan Reeves, that's fine. That usually means nothing's happening, which is preferable to what happened with the fourth line last year. They lost a lot of guys. They lost 3 forwards who played in their top 6 into the playoffs last year. They lost their backup goalie, who some people will say losing Georgiev is a good thing. Georgiev has been an above-average NHL goalie at points. I feel like missed opportunity there. And then Nemeth, they had to get rid of because they could not continue to play him because last year he was the worst defenseman in hockey. And that's statistically accurate. He was 0 percentile in WAR of all defensemen. 0%, not 0% WAR,
right.
0 percentile. So, like, if you think about a bell curve all the way across plotting data, he's the farthest to the left you could possibly go on that graph. So let's talk about the Rangers in this context. Let's think about it in terms of the biggest concern last year was they got good results with bad process. Will they be able to fix the process and get more sustainable results? In theory, you would think year 2 of a coach, you won't have the first 2 months of the season being just, dear God, if Igor doesn't save us tonight, we're not winning this game. Everybody's a little bit more comfortable with each other. You have real familiarity now in the top 2 D pairs. I mean, Trouba and Miller played, I think, the 4th most minutes of any D pair in hockey last year. Fox and Lindgren were like 9th or 10th, something in that ballpark. The third pair is going to be a work in progress. I already know we're going to see more Hayek than we want to. We'll have to deal with that when we get there.
For what it's worth, Hayek last night, well, we're recording this on Friday. We watched the game on Thursday. For what it's worth, Libor Hayek last night in the game that we were at, not the worst defenseman on the ice. So you know what? After all that we've talked about with Libor Hayek, I guess not being the worst one on the ice is an improvement. So he's working on it.
There were a lot of ECHL guys on the ice last night, Andrew. I don't know how much of an accomplishment that is. There were a lot of guys who are going back to ride the bus somewhere in bumblefuck South Dakota.
He's not the worst, Nick. Okay, like that. Listen, the goalposts are moving, and he wasn't the worst. That's better than what the usual outcome is.
So we'll talk about this more on a full Rangers preview because I want to talk a little bit about tactics and strategy. But the biggest issue for the Rangers last year was going from defense to offense, getting the puck out of their own zone to their talented forwards. It's great they have Zibanejad and Kreider and Panarin and Lafreniere and Hedl and all these guys who are really good with the puck on their stick. It doesn't matter if they don't have the puck, which was a real issue for the first 55 games last year because they just did not get the puck out of their own ends. They struggled mightily. And even Fox and Lindgren pinned in their own zone a lot because they struggled to get the puck back. That is something you're going to have to manually track. Unless you're like me and you pay for Corey Snyder's Patreon to get his transition stats, you have to manually do that. And that's one of the things I do when I watch a game and I'm not worried about anything else. I'll just track clean zone exits and do they have more than one scoring chance when they enter the zone. Those types of little things, because the Rangers have enough talent where they can get by with bad process. They did it all of last season. They could more than certainly do it again. I just want to see them go from a nice story to a genuine contender, which should be the goal this year. Is you went to the conference finals last year. You upgraded your second line center to somebody you think is a little bit better. You're going to give one of your top 10 lottery picks, whether it be Kravtsov, Kakko, Lafreniere, spots in the top 6 on the right wing. Go from nice story, it's great, the kid line, it's cute, all that, the really bad Sean McDonough joke about needing a nap, all that, it's great, it's cute, whatever. Now it's time to start actually winning. It's not just a nice story anymore. It's time to put up 100 points in the standings and go into the playoffs with, we need to win at least 2 rounds as the expectation.
I forgot about that Sean McDonough joke that you said on a broadcast, and now that you reminded me, I'm very upset that you have, because I thought I suppressed that memory out of my brain, but here you are bringing it back. The biggest issue with the Rangers is the right wing, and I know that the Rangers have talked about playing Lafreniere on the right side and all that, which is okay, that's fine. But if you do that, then you have to, I would imagine, break up the kid line, because then you're going to move Lafreniere to the top 6, and you're going to have Sammy Blais playing on the third line, which is better than playing him with Kreider and Zibanejad, which he did last night, and he did absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing, which means he'll get 45 games playing on the first line next season. But he can't be the solution. Okay, so if he's not the solution, then is Vitaly Kravtsov the solution? Okay, well, if Kravtsov has a slow start and gets 4 or 5 points in the first 18 games, then Gerard Gallant is going to be like, oh, well, this clearly isn't working. Let me try something else. And now a lot of this mix, like a lot of this lineup mixing is going to happen because the Rangers don't have that solidified first line right winger right now. Maybe they will add one at the deadline. Who knows? We're not even in October yet, so there's a lot of hockey left to be played. But as of right now, their right side is the biggest weakness, because if you have a solid top six right winger that can play with Zibanejad and Kreider or Trocheck and Panarin, then you have a much more dangerous team, because now it's not up to two guys on the line to provide most of the scoring. You have to worry about everybody on the ice. Teams aren't worrying about Sammy Blais. I gotta listen. Uh, I want Sammy Blais to score 100 goals. Every Rangers fan wants Sammy Blais to score 100 goals. Sure, is that going to happen? The answer is absolutely not. So when teams see, oh, Sammy Blais on the first line with Zibanejad and Kreider, okay, he just let him do whatever he wants. We have to worry about two players on this first line instead of three, because Sammy Blais just doesn't have, at least from what I've seen so far, what is a top six forward just capability. Maybe he has one. Maybe he, after 4 games has 8 goals, and then all of a sudden I look very silly. But as of right now, he hasn't shown that so far. So we'll see how that goes. But as of right now, the right side is the biggest red flag for me for the Rangers, because they don't have any top 6 player. And if you move Lafreniere to the right side, then you got to break up what was the Rangers' best line in the playoffs, which was the kid line. So now what? Now what do you do?
These are first world problems the Rangers have, is just kind of figuring out the right configuration of their top 9. It's a good problem to have. I imagine the 5 right wings they have, the 4 you mentioned, and Reeves, will all play at some point in this season. I imagine we will see pretty much them everywhere, and that includes maybe Loff on the right, Kakko on the first line, maybe that means Kravtsov on the second, whatever. I imagine there's going to be a lot of turnover there, because it seems like Gallant's pretty set on keeping Zibanejad with Kreider, keeping Trocheck with Panarin, and then keeping Kakko with Hedl. And it's a shame, because to some degree, I wonder if there's a better configuration you could have. I know I was talking with someone a couple days ago, and I forget who it was, but you remember how Carolina had that Jared Stahl line in the playoffs last year? They used to kind of match up a race. There's a world where the Rangers do that with Trocheck, Kakko, and Kreider, and they just, okay, you might have the puck, but you're not going to do anything with it. And there's just more flexibility if they would get away from these pairings that they don't, for whatever reason. I mean, we've been talking about this for, I think, a year and a half now. I need to see Andre play with Fox at some point to know if that's going to be a thing down the road, because it should be a thing down the road. Their games, their skill sets complement each other better than the Lindgren complements Fox and Trouba complements Miller, because they're redundant. They do the same things. So splitting them up, giving Fox a real shot suppressor like Andre would make Fox better, and then giving Trouba a shot suppressor like Lindgren, all Trouba wants to do is rip his slap shot from the point and line people up
and miss the net.
Yeah.
It's very important. That detail is the most important out of all of that, is that he just will miss the net. That's what he does.
Only God and the puck know where the puck's going. Trouba doesn't know.
Yeah.
Only God.
He has no idea.
Okay. Last thing go ahead.
So you know that hockey is back when Libor Hayek is in a Rangers jersey, and Julien Gauthier almost scores a goal. That's all what we saw last night is Julien Gauthier making all of these plays and almost scoring twice or 3 times. And even when the puck goes in, it gets disallowed. And it's Julien Gauthier. I've never seen a better almost goal scorer than Julien Gauthier. Hockey is so back when Gauthier is out here almost scoring and Hayek is back out there under Rangers jersey. Oh, how I miss this.
Okay, so the last question I have for you, and you can answer this pretty quick. Do you think winning the division should be the expectation for the Rangers this year?
I don't think it matters.
Okay.
I don't think people should look at
that. Well, no, because the matchup matters. Because if you're playing Washington in the first round versus Pittsburgh in the first round, I would much rather play Washington than Pittsburgh.
Sure.
That's where I frame it from. It's not really the... I don't need the Metropolitan Division Champions banner up there. I don't need that. I'm fine without that.
I mean, I don't would it be nice? Yeah, sure. I would rather have it than not have it. But I don't think that if the Rangers don't get it, that it's a problem.
Okay.
Because at the end of the day, especially if you're comfortably in the playoffs past the trade deadline and you start sitting guys and you lose out on the number one spot by a couple of points because half of your team sat, does that mean that the season's a failure or that you missed out on your goal? The answer is no. So I think right now for them is to get out to a really good start, get into a playoff position early, and then just ride that for the entire season. And then, hey, like if you get to the deadline and you pick up a right winger and you win 8-9 in a row and you shoot up all the way to the top of the division, great. But if you finish second, it's whatever. I don't really take too much, put too much onto that.
We will do a full episode on the Rangers at some point because we're going to talk a little bit more in depth, more strategy and stuff that only nerds like me are going to be talking about on a podcast. Because I'm looking at my dry erase board out of the corner of my eye and I'm ready to explain some things. Okay, so
Coach Zararis is here.
We have to.
Sure.
When we can explain things
Absolutely.
and put them into common sense terms. Yeah. So next up, Pittsburgh. They kept everybody together. There was some conjecture. Malkin might have left. Letang might have left. They're both back in the mix. They got a little, I don't want to, I guess gung-ho would be the word in swapping John Marino for Ty Smith, trading Mike Matheson and a draft pick for Jeff Petrie. Josh Archibald is a whatever third extra forward. And Jan Ruda, an extra defenseman who's probably going to end up playing second or third pair. The Penguins will be a fine regular season team. They probably should have beaten the Rangers in the first round last year.
Yeah,
but
yeah. Not probably. They really, really should have beat the Rangers. The Rangers got lucky. If you play that series back again, the Penguins win that series every time.
At this point, the Penguins it doesn't really matter where they're going to finish in the standings. If they get in the playoffs, that's their goal. They're going to be like Golden State, where Golden State's like the 4 seed. And yeah, that's all they need to do is just get in and hope they get the goaltending luck they need and hope that they can keep their stars healthy because this is a fine regular season team. Mike Sullivan's one of the best coaches in the NHL. They retooled their defense a little bit, which I think probably necessary. I don't know if Jeff Petrie is the guy they think they're getting. The Ty Smith for John Marino swap is interesting, just on conceptually that they feel that if they put Ty Smith in a better situation and ask a little bit less of him, they feel like they can get more out of him. Because John Marino as a rookie was pretty good. He had like 35 points. He finished like 4th or 5th in the why can't I think of what it's called? In the Calder voting. So it's an interesting idea, but this is a fine team. They don't really worry me. I mean, they've got money tied up in kind of bad players like Jason Zucker, and it's just they'll be fine. But I'm not really worried about them big picture as a cup contender.
So keep this graphic up for a second here. Let's just go back and forth here on their additions and their departures. So, do you like Ty Smith more than John Marino? For me, the answer is no. Do you like Jeff Petrie more than Mike Matheson? Now,
yes.
The answer to this is interesting because when the Penguins first acquired Mike Matheson, it was kind of seen as a joke that Mike Matheson was not an NHL defenseman or at least a fringe defenseman who couldn't do much for the Penguins. And why you trade for him? There's no reason to have him on your roster, yada, yada. And then he played exceptionally well for his role. And what he was asked to do, Mike Matheson did a tremendous job. Now, I think he still has a lot of years left on this deal, so that might be why the Montreal Canadiens said, "We love you, but like not for that long." So for that aspect, I understand. But Mike Matheson kind of revived his career in Pittsburgh. He went above and beyond on the ice for them. Not a whole lot of expectations, and he did what he was asked to do and more. I thought he was a really steady player for them, especially as the years went on with him in Pittsburgh. Do you like Josh Archibald more than Evan Rodriguez? The answer, of course, is no. Do you like Josh Archibald more than Zach Aston-Reese? And the answer to that, I think, is no as well. Jan Ruda is a defenseman. Okay. So to me, their additions don't really, equate to their departures. And if they were a team that bowed out in the first round last year with, I think, maybe a little bit of a better team, they are bringing back essentially the same team, just a year older. And my fear, if you're a Penguins fan, my fear for you is that if the Penguins either don't make the playoffs because of injuries or bad luck or whatever, or lose in the first round again, that you're going to be in the market for a different head coach. And that is really the biggest concern that I have for them, because Mike Sullivan is one of the best head coaches on the planet. And if he gets fired because this roster can't make it far in the playoffs, whoever gets him is going to get a massive steal.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. We've seen it. Coaches who've won cups, won championships, you get dismissed after a while. Your grace period. The one thing I'll say is I do think they're just going to go batshit balls to the walls to try and win one more with this group. And I think they would give Sid a lot of input on that decision of whether or not they're going to change coaches. So that would be my only pushback on that. Pittsburgh will be fine goaltending wise. Yari and DeSmith, again, neither of those guys is going to be the reason the Penguins do anything if they make some noise in the playoffs.
No.
That's really all there is to say about Pittsburgh. They're a good regular season team. Their expectations are higher than I think that are realistic for them. I think Pittsburgh views itself as a cup contender, where I kind of put them in the next tier below, where it would take a lot going their way to end up in that kind of situation.
They'll make the playoffs.
Yeah.
Anything other than that at this stage of their roster construction is essentially, to me, gravy. Maybe they go, like you said, just crazy at the deadline and really just throw. I mean, they already don't have any draft picks now, but they really won't have any draft picks if they trade every single pick that they have for one last run at a cup, which could be in the mix because of how much older Letang and Crosby and Malkin are. Like, they don't have a lot of gas in the tank left, and this is like, these are their last contracts. These are the contract that they got this summer. This is it. I would be very surprised if past these contracts those three kept playing. So this is it. And if you are going to make this wild run for a Stanley Cup with these current players, you do it now. Because if you wait too long, then Crosby and Letang and Malkin are going to be too slow, or just too, not 26 anymore to drive the entire team to a cup run. You need the older they get, the more pieces they're going to need around them to succeed. So if you're going to do it, you might as well do it now.
Okay. Next up, and this is the one part I found very interesting when I was talking about Josh's Washington, and Josh thinks Washington, this is the year all the wheels finally come off. You don't know when Backstrom is coming back. John Carlson's your best defenseman. He's another year older. Ovechkin is only chasing goals at this point. He's not really giving you anything. There's no young guys in this group aside from maybe Connor McMichael, who might be able to give you something. The Capitals are here to make the playoffs, but they're more here just to give Ovechkin a real chance of breaking the goal scoring record at this point. I mean, they lost both of their goalies from last year. They brought in Kemper. Kemper win a cup, get paid, nice for him. Connor Brown's a nice signing. Dylan Strome, nice signing. Eric Gustafson, okay signing, and Charlie Lindgren as your backup goalie. These are all fine moves, but the Capitals core at this point just isn't really anything to write home about. They should make the playoffs. They are first round exit again, I think, for like the fourth year in a row.
Backstrom might be done.
Yeah, he really might be.
He literally might not play a game again. And that's really worrying if you're a Capitals fan. He is, I think, and I think most Capitals fans will agree with me, one of the most underrated players in the entire history of the NHL. My man's is one of the most elite passers. He's got such an eye for where the puck currently is, where it can be, how to get the puck to somebody else that's on the ice that's wearing the same jersey. He has such an elite view of the entire sheet of ice, and to lose a guy like that, even for a short amount of time, you quickly realize, we cannot replicate this. There's absolutely nobody on this team that can replicate that kind of magic that that Backstrom had. So when you lose a player of that caliber and you don't replace him, I mean, just because by virtue of you can't, because he's kind of one of one in the NHL, and there's been only a handful of players like that in the entire history of the NHL that can move the puck as well as Nick Backstrom can. You lose a guy like that, Alex Ovechkin's another year older. Yeah, he's still going to score 40, 50, 60 goals if that's what he chooses to do. But everybody else, what can you really hope to achieve with this current roster? Yeah, both capital goalies left. Vanacek now in New Jersey, Samsonov now in Toronto. I kind of like Darcy Kemper more than both of those goalies.
Yeah.
Charlie Lindgren, I don't have a whole lot of faith in. Maybe, hopefully, he proves me wrong. But as of right now, I kind of don't trust Lindgren a lot. Connor Brown is a good piece for them. Dylan Strome, a good piece for them. Eric Gustafsson can't play defense at all, even though he's listed as a defenseman, and your number one objective as a defenseman is to defend, which he can't do. So, will they make the playoffs? I would think that Ovechkin will score 100 goals if need be to push them into the playoffs. Past that, I kind of don't. I don't see it.
No, that's the one thing, like big picture, and we can talk about this at the end. A lot of this division is old. Like even the Rangers core it's old, but it's not as old as Washington's. It's not as old as Pittsburgh's. Carolina's probably got the youngest core players who are like the best players on the team of anyone in this division. But it bodes well for a Rangers team that has so many young guys in the mix who are going to have to step up at some point in the next year or so. So next up, we've got the Islanders, who were a disappointment last year. They had the year from hell. They started out the year 10 straight road games. The entire team had COVID at one point. They fired their coach in the offseason because of a behind-the-scenes power struggle. They made one addition. They brought in Alexander Romanov. Char and Andy Green both retired. This is the same exact team as last year with Alexander Romanov on it. I have no idea what to expect from the Islanders. I've stopped trying to guess at this point. Last year was the first year everybody was consensus. Yeah, the Islanders are going to be a very good team. And then, they missed the playoffs after 2 straight years of defying everybody's statistical models. This is an interesting group. It's an older group. I'm still waiting for them to get Mark Barzal, a winger capable of complementing him, because Barzal is going to die with like a career high of 70 points because he's never played with anybody of his skill level aside from that one season. They played him on the wing and played Tavares at center so that they could have their 2 best players on one line. I'd like to see Barzal have the season I think he's capable of because I've invested a lot of stock in him. I still think he's a dominant player waiting for the right complementary pieces around him. This Islanders team could be great. They could be god-awful. I really have no idea.
One of the things to keep in mind, and we talked about this earlier in previous episodes, is how much of a change Brad Lambert is going to... Brad Lambert, right? Or Lane Lambert?
Lane Lambert. Brad Lambert. Brad Lambert's the Jets
right.
draft pick.
Yeah. Also, apparently he's Finnish. I don't know. But that's interesting. But yeah, anyways, like Lane Lambert, he's been Barry Trotz's right-hand man for years and years and years now. But now it's going to be his first rodeo as a head coach. And while the assumption is that he is going to be very similar to Barry Trotz, my counterpoint to that is then why fire Barry Trotz? Like, it is the idea from the Islanders' perspective, like we want to have the same system, but have a head coach that doesn't want more more control of their team, because that's what it reads like from an outsider's perspective, from somebody that isn't in the Islanders organization. This is what it seems to me. Like they want the same style, the same process, the same everything, but they want a head coach that doesn't want input on the players that are on his team, which I think is very strange. I mean, that's what Lou does. Lou makes strange things. The check marks die for him every day on Twitter. They think it's funny, whatever he does, even though it's not. And that's just the way that he runs his team. So for the Islanders, the argument could be made that they would have made the playoffs if not for their horrific start, like you mentioned, and if they were a little bit more healthier, that they had more points built up earlier throughout the season, that they would have made the playoffs, and that's a valid argument. But the point is that they didn't, and because of that, they fired their head coach. So they also did nothing. The entire season, they did absolutely nothing. They traded for Alexander Romanov, and that was it. That's it.
I did enjoy. I don't know if you saw the clip on Twitter, but they had one of their season ticket holder meetings in the off season, and Lou went up there and gave his best Trump lying impression, and went up there and said, "Well, we evaluated the free agent market, and we didn't want anybody who was out there. We didn't think they fit our team well. But we know you tried to get Johnny Gaudreau on your team. He just picked somewhere else. We know." The bold-faced lying in spite of all logic. I don't get it.
It doesn't even make sense.
Yes, exactly.
Like even if you face your season ticket holders, these are the people that give you the most amount of money that they want to show up for every home game. They are there to support the team. Why lie to them? Because it's such a blatant fact that the Islanders really wanted Johnny Gaudreau. So to go to the most passionate fans in your fan base and say that you liked nobody on the market is such an
ridiculous,
unnecessary lie. What is what purpose do you have of saying we liked nobody, so shrug emoji, we didn't sign anybody? At least just be like, hey, we tried. There was a few people on the market that we tried for. We did everything we could. Go do what Brad Treliving did in Calgary. We're like, we tried everything we could to get Johnny Gaudreau here, but ultimately he decided to go somewhere else. That would have been such a better answer than just say like, oh, whoopsie-doo, we didn't like anybody, so better luck next year. Like, that's such a, it's, there's avenues that you can go as an NHL general manager to lie effectively. Lou is doing it because he just doesn't know how to tell the truth anymore. Like, what purpose does that serve when we all know you're lying? We know.
Yeah. Speaking of Johnny Gaudreau, Columbus, I want to see them play all three of their good forwards on one line. That's really all I want from them this season. I don't expect much from them. I'd like to see if they give Boquist a little more burn and see if he can start making progress towards being a quality NHL defenseman. But I want to see Johnny play with Line A, and that's really it. That's really all I have to say about the Blue Jackets. I just want to see somebody load up a team like a 12-year-old playing at the NHL for EA Sports NHL franchise, put the three best players on the team on the first line, and screw what the other 9 forwards do. Just cook. Let Gaudreau set up Line A and let Line A go for 50 again. Let's go nuts.
I love the Jekyll and Hyde of their offseason where, hey, we're going to get Johnny Gaudreau, but we're also going to get Eric Goodbranson. I love that because Johnny Gaudreau is such an incredible hockey player. His metrics are all very high, and the eye people love him, the stat people love him. Like, everybody loves Johnny Gaudreau. And then there's Eric Goodbranson, who like everybody doesn't like besides NHL GMs.
He's pretty, reason. Andrew.
Yeah, I guess it's just like people
he's
that
long,
watch,
tall, and handsome. He's
right.
tall. He's 6'4".
Right.
That gets you your check.
He tall. Yeah, that's how Tyler Myers got his check in Vancouver. But it's just like, besides the fact that he tall and he sometimes can maybe hit people occasionally, he does nothing. He literally does nothing, and he got 4 years, $4 million per season to be tall on Columbus's blue line. So I don't really know what Columbus's thought process is, and I don't really know why GMs continue to sign this guy, but that's neither here nor there. For Columbus, they bring in a great player, and they also bring in somebody who can't really play his position. Now what? Your goaltenders were a problem last season and years before, where you really expect more out of them, and they haven't been able to step up to the plate. Jonas Korpisalo has struggled in recent years, and for them, they haven't really addressed that issue. So where do you go from here if you're Columbus? You bring in Johnny Gaudreau, who's going to score more goals for you. You're going to be closer in some games, but the issues that you had are still issues. You resolved none of them. So now what do you do?
I think realistically, they're banking on the Merzlikins bounce back because Merzlikins has shown them the ability to be a 9-15, 9-20 goalie for large stretches of a season, even on pretty bad teams. They're still obviously in a building stage, which they're at least a year away from being a year away. They when you look at their lineup on Daily Faceoff, I mean, their first line center is listed as Boone Jenner, Jack Roslovich, Cole Sillinger. This is Kent Johnson. I'm a little curious to see. They still have Gus Nyquist and Voracek kicking around, but this is a roster in flux. They're a few years away. I just want to see if their younger guys like Johnson, like Boquist, can start becoming actual players. That's really where I'm at on Columbus. The Devils, who we're about to talk about, the Devils might have won the offseason again, Andrew. I know we make this joke every single year that the Devils win the offseason, but objectively, I mean, I like pretty much I would have kept Ty Smith over John Marino just because I think Ty Smith has a better amateur pedigree than Marino did in college. But you bring in Palat, you shore up your top six. Brendan Smith to replace PK Subban, that's a good addition. Vanacek to replace any of the 5 AHL goalies you played last year, that's fine. Losing Pavel Zacha because you couldn't come to an agreement, it kind of sucks. Eric Holla is kind of an empty. He's just a guy. He'll get 20 points. He'll get 10 to 15 goals and 35 points, but he's not giving you anything special. If the Devils' young guys play as well as we think they're capable of, and Nico Hischier is already injured as I'm saying this, but if they can stay healthy, this Devils team is good. I mean, you go down the middle with Hischier and Hughes. You've got Mercer. You've got Jesper Bratt. This is a very the high end outcome for this group could be really good. I mean, their over under is 88.5, which is pretty high. I mean, usually playoffs is low 90s. So the odds makers like the Devils close to a playoff spot.
If you're a Devils fan, you're gonna like the next thing I say. I have a legitimate feeling that Jack Hughes might break 100 points.
I hope so.
There is an argument to be made because he was over a point of game last season and only played in half the season last year. Like if he just played the same way for 82 games, he would have broken 100 points last season. I legitimately think that Jack Hughes will be 100 point plus this next season. Of course, if he plays 82 games or at least close to that, if he gets injured, then that's going to break what I think. But like, if he stays healthy, I do expect him to either be very close to that or I would think he's going to break 100 points. He's such a phenomenal player. I mean, the way he sees the game on both ends of the ice too, which is something that I really value as we talked about a few weeks ago in our top 20 best overall players. Jack Hughes is a name that we didn't mention because he's still, I think, maybe too early in the process. But if he puts up 100-point season and he dominates the way that we've seen flashes of to this point, the case can be made that he's either knocking on the door or is already one of the best players in the NHL. He's an incredible player, such a flawless skater as well. Like he's really just a perfect package in terms of a forward that you want to have in your top six. The concerns come deeper on the team because okay, well if Jack Hughes isn't scoring for you and your top six isn't scoring for you, who's gonna do it? Who's doing it? Is Michael McLeod gonna score goals for you if Nico Hischier and Jack Hughes isn't going to score for you? Is that it? Because if that's your solution, then we have a conversation needs to be had. I love Dougie Hamilton. Brendan Smith, I mean, is he better than PK Subban? I mean,
yeah,
I guess because PK Subban, like one of the things with him is that he never quite really adjusted to being a slower defenseman. He continued to play like he was the elite skater that he was in Montreal, never panned out, and because of that, he fell off a cliff because he couldn't keep up with anybody. And even though in his head he pretended to. So is Brendan Smith better than someone who thinks that there's somebody that they no longer are? I guess. I didn't like Brendan Smith when he was a Ranger. The Rangers played him at forward, even though they had defensive problems because of how little they trusted Brendan Smith on defense. Like they played a defenseman as their 12th forward, even though they couldn't field 6 healthy defensemen because of how little they trusted Brendan Smith to play defense. So I guess he's better than someone who just retired, but like their blue line is still weak. Dougie Hamilton is a tremendous player who strikes fear in me every time I see him out on the ice. John Marino, I like better than Ty Smith, and Damon Severson's really good, I think as well. So their right side is solid. Their left side with Ryan Graves and Jonas Siegenthaler and Brendan Smith, yikes! Just how about this? If you're playing the New Jersey Devils, just skate to the left side and you'll be fine.
Next year, when they bring in Luke Hughes, and then the year after that, when they bring in Nemec from the Slovakian league, that'll be interesting.
Yeah,
the Devils, the Devils do worry me the most of any team in this division in terms of the long term, because they have just picked at the top of the draft for so long now that eventually some of these guys are going to pop. I mean, you talked about it. Jack Hughes is already, if he hasn't already kind of established himself, is about to, because all of the underlying numbers are crazy. He's the best transition player other than Connor McDavid in terms of just getting to the offensive zone and setting up himself for line mates for scoring opportunities. He's going to be our guy in this league for a long time. Let's make fun of the Flyers for 5 minutes and go home.
Sure.
Okay. Do you want to start with Tortorella or D'Angelo? Because both are hysterical in the context of 2022.
I want to start with Chuck Fletcher making 900 moves, signing these players to ridiculous contracts, and then turning around and saying it would have been too hard to sign Johnny Gaudreau. That to me, like, just takes the cake for if anybody ever says to you on Twitter or otherwise that GMs know more than we do and that we couldn't be NHL general managers, laugh in their face, because
we wouldn't be the worst. We would not be the worst.
Is still the general manager of an NHL team. You're telling me, and you want me to believe that it was harder to move money out to sign Johnny Gaudreau than it would have been to not sign these players to ridiculous contracts in order to make money to sign Johnny Gaudreau. That's what you're telling me.
And let me tell you something else, Andrew. This is a team that the other day, like, just kind of casually news dumped. We don't know if Ryan Ellis is ever going to play hockey again.
Sure.
That's $5.5 million of the $9 million Johnny Gaudreau got. That and Nick Deslauriers pays for Johnny Gaudreau, basically. This is not as hard as Chuck Fletcher made it out to be. Tortorella just being in this circus just makes it all the funnier, because I know he was miserable doing TV last year. You could tell he put not a lot of emotion into it and did not have a lot of fun.
No, he hated Zegras for having an Adams worth of personality. So,
this is going to be an absolute disaster. They don't know if Sean Couturier is going to play this year. If you don't have Couturier, you don't have Ryan Ellis. Good luck, Kevin Hayes.
Yeah.
That's all I got for you. Good luck, Kevin Hayes and Cam Atkinson. That's all I got.
They don't have anything. Like they signed Nick Deslauriers to this ridiculous contract. They're still paying Ristolainen to that ludicrous contract they signed him back when he was a free agent. They are still paying James Van Riemsdyk a lot of money to do cardio. Like they just don't have anybody that can do much of anything. I mean, Cam Atkinson is still somebody that can do damage to teams, but if he's the only player on your team that can do damage, you got a problem. So the Flyers might take a look at trading away Cam Atkinson, or I mean, maybe they'll try to trade away Van Riemsdyk, but I don't know who will take him at that current salary. Maybe they might even do the unspeakable and trade away Rasmus Ristolainen. Oh no, the Flyers legend that is the man who he tall but can't play hockey at all. My man's is bad. But for the Philadelphia Flyers, even if Carter Hart for somehow, some way drops a .940 save percentage, I still don't think they make the playoffs. No. This team is constructed so poorly. Chuck Fletcher doesn't know what he's doing, what he's saying half the time, what his outlook on the franchise is. And the moment he gets fired and the next person comes in and tries to fix the roster, I don't even know where to start. Like if they called me they're not, but hey, if you got my number, let me know. If they fire Chuck Fletcher and call me and say, "Hey Andrew, like you're the next general manager, what are you gonna do day one?" Like I don't even know what.
I'm trading Provorov. I'm trading Atkinson. I would try and trade Kevin Hayes.
Well, right, but
assets. You got to get assets.
Right,
You got to start over.
But the idea that at least that I have in my mind is that Chuck Fletcher has at least tried these things, or at least has had conversations with
Andrew,
teams.
you're giving him too much credit. You're giving him too much credit.
Maybe I am, but I do think at least Chuck Fletcher has reached out to some teams to see like what the price could potentially be, or like doing something that is pertaining to his job as general manager. I don't know, but like for the Philadelphia Flyers, like this is a disaster fire. Like this team,
Connor Bedard sweepstakes.
This team is very deeply in the Connor Bedard sweepstakes, and I cannot possibly see a scenario in which the Flyers get out of it. I mean, there's I guess that slimmer of hope of like, hey, maybe if Carter Hart drops a 940 and Kevin Hayes scores 70 goals and James Van Riemsdyk all of a sudden remembers how to play hockey again and he drops 50 goals, then like, yeah, I guess. But all of these things happening at the same time for the Flyers this season, the answer is no. So maybe pick up baseball or pick up football or something, because
the Eagles are good.
Yeah,
the Eagles
I guess.
Are good. They got
that. But yeah, the Sixers are going to be fun this year, and you know, like, they're going to be a fun team. So I guess just for the season, just watch some basketball, man. Because if you're a Flyers fan, there's not going to be a whole lot there for you to watch.
All right, let's get the people out of here. This show is available Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all the major podcasting platforms. Videos up on YouTube. If you want to see the pretty little graphics, watch on YouTube. The show is live on Twitch, YouTube, and Twitter every single Monday, 6:30, 7, starting somewhere in that window. Content during the week. Going to start ramping up now that we actually have hockey to talk about, as opposed to us just having to find things to talk about.
We're actually going to be a Rangers podcast, Nick. Can you believe that? We've been doing this for, I don't know, 4 months now, and
about 4 months,
I
without
think, like,
hockey to talk about.
Yeah, we've talked about.
We've done
Flyers.
The hard part.
We've talked about the Flyers and Nathan McKinnon's spot in the top 20 long enough. Like now, we're going to talk about the Rangers. We're going to have a separate episode about just the Rangers and their season preview soon, and then we're actually just going to talk about the Rangers. Like that's. This podcast is a Rangers podcast, so it's nice after 4 months of not talking about the Rangers that we finally get to talk about it. But it's great.
Be sure to be subscribed. Leave reviews if you're on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Those are always helpful for your content creators. Be sure to follow Andrew on Twitter. He's Chelney Andrew, CHELNEY. I am Nick Zararis, Nick Zararis on Twitter. Those are our personal handles. The show's Twitter is Liberty Blue Pod. Show's Instagram is Liberty Blue Pod. On YouTube and Twitch, it's Liberty Blue Podcast. We will see you guys next week. We will be doing the Ranger specific episode. I'm going to Alabama this weekend for the race at Talladega. That's why we can't record on Monday.
Oh, wow.
Don't know what time I'll be back on Monday, and didn't want to have to record an episode at 11 o'clock after traveling all day. So
sure. Well,
we will be back, and we'll have plenty to talk about. Plenty to talk about.
To be fair, I couldn't do last Monday because eventually that I learned as I was there that I was only there for James Harden to laugh at me. So there's at least that. If you don't know what I'm talking about, go on my Twitter page and you find out, because James Harden. I mean, we had a good laugh about it because I was at Sixers training camp, and we had a good laugh about it. But I maybe I should practice my 3-point shooting a little bit more.
You can do that over the weekend while I'm in Alabama. All right,
sure.
We'll see you guys next week.
Later.